Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Let me know if you can't. So, thanks for joining me this evening. Today, we're going to answer some questions about some personal boundaries that I've received over the last couple of weeks. So, this is really like a beginner's stage of boundaries. Really looking at the beginner's steps in setting boundaries, implementing them, and so if you don't already know me, my name is Caroline and I am from Life Coaching. I help people who are interested stories in their lives discover their authentic selves and move to the next chapter with confidence and strength in their own life. So in this coaching session, I'm going to answer I've got 5 questions about personal boundaries. If you've got any questions as we're going along, just pop them into the comments to the actual live stream. It won't show me who you are, so just before you put your comment, put your name, and then I can sort of reply and answer the question. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first thing is, what are personal boundaries? So personal boundaries are all about you. They are the guidelines that you set yourself that govern your behaviour and your response. So I think probably the biggest thing I want to get across is that the most important thing about boundaries is that they are created to guide your behaviour, your response, and not to control and manipulate others. I remember years ago when I was first learning about boundaries, it just I didn't get it. I was like, I just don't understand how I can use this to stop people from doing things, or how can I get them to do the things that I want. And it wasn't until it clicked in my head that it was nothing to do with other people and it was all to do with me that I really started to understand. So there's a lot of definitions for boundaries. You can call them a limit, a safety net, rules about your own behavior, guidelines for your responses, a framework for your interpersonal relationships, an outward reflection of your values, your level of comfort, the ability to say no, the difference between you and someone else. But the one that I really like to go with is the things that you're okay with and the things that you're not okay with. So, boundaries are important for your relationship with yourself and others. It allows you to communicate your needs clearly so that there's no mind reading or guesswork from other people. An example of a boundary, and it's one that I developed personally for me, is that I will not continue conversations with people who are yelling at me. So that's a very simple boundary, and we'll get a little bit more in depth as we go along. So if you have any questions about what boundaries are, just pop them in the channel for me. Okay, question 2 is, what are the different types of boundaries? So generally, we have categories of boundaries, and I've listed them here, and I'll pop them into the notes at the end. But we have physical boundaries, and these include sexual boundaries, and they are there to protect our bodies and our physical space. We have verbal boundaries, and they are to protect ourselves in conversations. So, my boundary about not being yelled at is a verbal boundary. We have property boundaries, and this includes money. So, this is to protect the use and the misuse of what we have ownership of. We have time boundaries, and these are to protect the use and misuse of our time. We have emotional boundaries to protect our emotional well-being, intellectual boundaries, and these are really around our beliefs and our values, and they protect the things that we hold dear, that we find important. And finally, we have technological boundaries. So these are the ones that protect us as we interact with technology. So, an example of a time boundary is that I don't wait for longer than 15 minutes if I'm meeting someone and they haven't notified me that they are running late. So, that's the one that falls into the time category. So, moving on, question number 3: how do I work out what my boundaries are? Well, the way that I like to do it is to think about experience that I've had or that I'm going through in my life right now that I feel uncomfortable about. So, my first step is to write down behavior that's happening that's not okay by me. So, I'm going to use my son as an example because teaching boundaries to my kids is something that I find really important, and he's 7. And so his boundary is around hugging. He's not a big fan of hugging people. And so what's not okay with him is being expected to automatically hug people. So, people put out their arms and they just expect that he's going to run into them and give him a hug. He's not that kind of person, and he's not comfortable with it. So the next stage is flipping it. So you know what you're not okay with, and then you're going to look at what you are okay with. So what he is okay with is hugging people that ask him and that he consents to. And so what that really does is it looks at the need that we're trying to fulfill. So for him, he's trying to fulfill the need of his personal safety. He doesn't feel safe hugging people. So that's why it's a really important boundary for him. So his boundary would be, I don't hug people unless they've asked first and I'm feeling okay about it. So it's really important to write down the boundary based on you and your response and your behavior. So in that example, he's not going to hug people. That is his behavior and his response to the situation. Oh, thank you. Who said I like the classifications? That's really nice. Thank you. So, question 4 is something that I get asked quite a bit because it's all well and good to, have your boundaries listed down and understand what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. But it can be quite a bit of a challenge to implement them, particularly if you're used to being an agreeable person and people have an expectation that, you're the person that's always nice. And you feel like you're not being kind when you put boundaries into place. So, I guess the first myth I want to smash there is about kindness. So, it is actually more kind to tell someone that you're not okay with something than to pretend that you are. And they kind of get the vibe that something's not right. They're not sure if they've done something wrong. It is much kinder to have clear communication from the get go. So, once you've established your boundaries, you have different options on how you can put them into place. And something that's really important to remember is that personal boundaries don't have to be communicated for them to exist. We all have our limits and our lines of comfort, and they're there whether you tell people about them or not. But you might have people that you choose to share your boundaries with, and sharing those boundaries might make them more likely to be respected. So I can see here that someone said, I always feel like I'm being mean when I put boundaries into place, and eventually it blows up. So, yeah, I really understand where you're coming from there. But as I said, being about you means that you're being clear with what's okay and what's not okay. You don't always have to set a boundary, you know, once it's been crossed and feel really uncomfortable with the person, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So there are two ways that I can see that you can have boundaries. So you can be proactive with your boundaries, or you can be reactive with them. And there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of being aware of what you're doing. So when you're proactive with your boundaries, it means you're working them out first and then telling people what they are before they cross them. So an example of a proactive boundary would be, just to let you know up front, I don't have sex without the use of a condom. So that's something that you would say to someone before the line is crossed. Um, a reactive boundary is letting someone know about it once it's been crossed. And an example of that would be, I can't continue this conversation if you're yelling at me. So when you're setting a boundary, you always have options with your actions. So you can be reactive or you can be a proactive. And you can also choose the different ways that you're going to implement your boundary. So you can always make a request that someone does or doesn't do something, but also understanding that they have the right to say no. You can change your own behavior. So, for example, with the hugging one, so what I'm trying to teach Eli to do, that's my son, is that when someone puts their hands out to hug him and he's not comfortable with it, is that he can go in for a handshake as well, because he's much more comfortable with that than giving a hug. So that's a different option he has, but the boundary stays the same. He also has the choice to say to me, Mum, I'm not comfortable. I don't want a hug. And that's totally okay. Being a parent, I'll be there to, help him reinforce his boundaries. I've got a really awesome comment here from Kat. And she said, something that I find really disappointing is that when people assume that consent is sexual and that's it. And sorry, my phone is going off here. I thought I put it on silent. 1 second. There we go. I had to explain to a school principal that his son coerced a prep child to hug another prep child who had adamantly said no when asked if she wanted a hug. The father laughed at me when I was explaining this to him and thought it was ridiculous that I was discussing consent with him. He didn't seem interested in hearing about the situation at all. Well, I'm really sorry, Kat, that you had that conversation. But it is people like you who are explaining the concept of consent to people that will eventually make a difference. So, as you said, consent is not just sexual, consent is about everything. We all have the ability to say yes, and we all have the ability to say no. So, good work. Even though that wasn't a great experience for you, I hope you keep doing that. So, as I said, we have the ability to have proactive boundaries or reactive boundaries. And what we just need to remember there is the boundaries are about your actions and not the actions of other people. So, the last question, and this is going to be a bit of a quicker live stream session than I normally do. But people say, how can I maintain boundaries when I'm a people pleaser, when it's not easy, when this doesn't come naturally to me? Well, I empathize with the difficulty because it's something that I've experienced as well. I've been the person that's felt that, oh, it's not kind to say no. And I've only learnt through experience that it's actually a lot less kind to leave people guessing. So, a people pleaser is someone that other people consider to be helpful and kind. And the problem with being a people pleaser is that you often put other people's needs before your own. And people pleasing is a learned behavior, which means that you need to unlearn it. So, as I've said, all the way through, being kind in the way that quite often we're brought up to think that we're being kind is to do what people tell us to do, to go along with everything and to not ruffle any feathers. So, being able to say no and having a bit of a plan for how you're going to do that is really important, because it can, even when you're doing a reactive boundary, going, oh, actually, I don't like that, because you've sort of planned out what is okay with you and what's not okay with you, you can temper down that adrenaline rush. So quite often, you know, I know myself that if I'm in a situation where I'm not happy and I need to tell somebody about it and I'm not prepared, it can come across in my tone of voice. But with my boundaries in particular, because I know them so well, I'm actually able to explain them quite calmly to people. And I find that that really makes a difference. So, the main reason that having boundaries and putting them into place when you're a people pleaser is so hard is because you haven't really had any role models and you haven't really had any practice. So, my advice there and what I recommend is to start with the safe people in your life. So, the people that you trust and the people that you know respect you. And, you can just say to them, look, I'm practicing doing my boundaries. I'm just going to, give you a little bit of conversation with this and let's talk about it and see what they think. It's much easier to start that way and get some confidence from the ground up rather than starting with the really big, tough situations. Okay, so there you go. We have been, oh, let me just have a look. There is another comment. What happens if we find our boundaries fluctuate? Like, what if I have a boundary around hugging and there's someone I really enjoy hugging? A boundary is a constant, ever shifting negotiation. Okay, that is a really great question because you can have boundaries that are around certain people, and that's totally okay. So while my son is, I know he's okay hugging me, he's okay hugging his dad, we've kind of got that sort of consent that goes on, but he knows that if he doesn't want a hug, he can say that. But there are some people that he doesn't really want to hug, and that's okay. You might have people that the things that they say or do trigger you because you've got maybe a bit of a history with them, or you've got a bit of a history with the topic. So I feel like it's totally okay for your boundaries to fluctuate. So while you need to be consistent with people. So, let's say consistent with if you've got a friend that, let me think of an example. So, okay, so let's say that you have a friend that drinks a lot of alcohol and they're loud and they're obnoxious and they're annoying. And so you really don't want to spend too much time with them while they're drinking. And you explain to them, yeah, look, it's something I don't really enjoy that much. And, I'm happy to hang out, but if you're going to be drinking, you let me know so I can sort of make a choice. But then you have other friends that aren't such a problem with that. And that's okay. As long as you're consistent with the friend that you talked about the boundary with, then that's totally fine. Um, okay, so I think the next comment is someone helping answering the question. So thank you for that. Okay. So thank you for all of those questions. That's really good. And I hope that I've been of some help. As I said, it's just very much a beginner's type thing that I wanted to talk about because, some people really, really struggle with putting these things into place and even understanding what their boundaries are and that it's okay to have them. And what I've done is I've created a boundaries workbook. So it's Boundaries for Beginners. And it's a guided workbook where I've put together to help you build, implement, and communicate your boundaries. So if you're interested in that, it's a free resource. I'll include the link for you at the end and you can download it. If you're got any other questions about boundaries, then I have a form as well that I'll pop in, and you can ask those questions anonymously, and I will do my best to answer them. So, what I'm going to do over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to release some quite short YouTube videos, just sort of answering one question at a time around boundaries and build up like a bit of a collection for people. So, thank you so much for being with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.